Last week, I devoted my entire Genesis review to pooning TNA and their decision to push a couple of things off to this week and not deliver what they had promised to the audience, to their customers. And I still stand behind what I said last week. That is poor form and that is bad business. There are many things you can do that you can potentially get away with. One thing you cannot do, especially if you make a habit of it on a consistent basis, is pull the old bait and switch and basically misrepresent what you're going to give to your customers and lie to your customers. Now, thankfully, you got that out of the way last week because you could pretty much say TNA gave you just about everything they told you they were going to give you for this week, the second part of Genesis. And I had seen some recent reports, apparently, that Vince Russo may very well indeed be working back with TNA Creative again, to which TNA denied it, so I'm likely to believe that that is true. And watching this show this week, there seemed to be a lot of Russo influences in the show. You had girls in a cage, you had a freaking briefcase on a pole match, just the main event, the way that was done, yet another title change with the X Division title. There were a lot of Russo influences in this show. Whether or not he's a part of the company, I really don't know. But you could see those influences, which I'm sure will make a lot of TNA fans go, oh, God. But the funny thing is that I felt for the most part this show came across very well this week. This to me was a really good show, and it was much better than the show I got last week. You had better matches, you had a little less talky, and you had some important things go on with this week's Impact episode, this part 2 of Genesis, this free pay-per-view. I actually liked the show, like I said, quite a bit this week. One of the featured attractions for the second part of Genesis was Gunner versus James Storm in this briefcase on a pole match. As soon as I heard them say this, I said, oh, God, Russo is back. But I love this. You've got two TNA guys doing battle, having a feud. This is a feud that it spurs off of them being a tag team, being tag team champions, being friends, and now they're not so much. And you still are left even wondering now who's really heel and who's really face. And this, I'm not sure if this is the blow-off to the feud or not, but if it was a solid blow-off. I almost kind of wish that this feud continues a little bit, and maybe, yeah, I can't even believe I'm going to say this, maybe even goes all the way to Lockdown. This is an example of the type of business that TNA should have been doing in years past. Now you've got a guy in Gunner who you're building up. You've got a guy in James Storm that you're putting in a relevant feud, in a relevant situation. You're featuring two TNA guys, not two former washed-up, has-been WWE or WCW or ECW guys. That in and of itself leaves me very encouraged. And Gunner winning, kind of typical of TNA matches, maybe the finish fell a little flat in the way it came across, but I got at least what TNA was trying to accomplish with the way they booked this finish, and I thought it told a good story in and of itself. And I like kind of the mad scramble thing. Maybe this was something that was better conceptually than it was once it was executed. I don't know. But I got what they were going for. I understood it, and I appreciated it. A good match, and it was about what I expected this match to deliver, so I was pleased. The X Division title rematch between Chris Sabin and Austin Aries. This kind of is one of these things where it feels like they're kind of rushing it in a way, like they're having match, title change. I'm just like, do you need to have so many title changes? Like I said, this is the type of stuff that you look at and you say, oh, well, maybe Vince Russo is involved in this company again. One thing that has always frustrated me with this company is it seems like, by and large, they don't give nearly enough time to the X Division matches, especially an X Division title match like this. And it felt like they really didn't. It felt like this match was kind of almost a blink and you missed it. I know it wasn't fully, but it felt like it could have used more time. I do like how they incorporated the gift that Velvet got from Chris Sabin, and then when she brings the bag, it's got the teddy bear and nothing else. I like how Austin Aries tried to put the teddy bear in his thing. I'm wondering, are they trying to have Austin Aries take Chris Sabin's bitch? Is that fully where they're going with this? Or was she just used to incorporate her into the story in some way? I'm not really sure. I like heel Chris Sabin much better than I like babyface Chris Sabin. I like Austin Aries and kind of almost like the semi-tweener role, but in a tweener role where you're still allowed to cheer for him, and that was good. Austin Aries is the X Division champ again, and I'm fine with that. I think it's kind of a crime to have somebody like him as your X Division champion and not feature him on TV each and every week and have him in a meaningful feud. So let's hope they go forward with this. Maybe they'll have one last match between him and Saban, and then they'll have Austin Aries have a nice run as X Division champion again. That's what I'm hoping for, anyway. I have to confess something. When I found out way back when that Rockstar Spud had won British Boot Camp for TNA, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, what in the hell are they going to do with this run? What the hell are they going to do with this midget? Seriously, that was my thought at the time, especially when you had the Blossom Twins on the show. I'm like, why wouldn't you have one or both of the Blossom Twins win it? You know, I wasn't sure what they were going to do. But I've really liked what TNA has done with Rockstar Spud, and I will give them a tremendous amount of credit. He is one of my favorite characters in professional wrestling right now, bar none, period. And I love the way they've decided to focus on developing a personality and a character and a gimmick and a purpose for him instead of just having him be another wrestler, another X Division guy that 1 week's on TV and 1 week isn't. I love what they're doing here with Rockstar Spud. And that backstage segment this week with him and EC3 was incredible. That was comedy of the highest order. Freaking A, was this awesome. Rockstar Spud showing his chops as an actor, if you will. I loved it. Oh, God, this was funny. EC3 trying to sell him that he could actually beat Samoa Joe. He was the British Boot Camp champion, even though Rockstar Spud said, yeah, I beat 2 girls, so what? His little freaking bow tie, him saying he was a cougar, no, he's lying. Rah, rah. All that, unfortunately, to go out there and get crushed by Samoa Joe. The poor guy, the poor chap. And when you say poor chap, poor guy, you could also maybe refer to Samoa Joe in TNA as well. Yeah, I think it kind of holds true. But, man, Rockstar Spud, Ethan Carter III, I can't wait till that point down the road where these guys get a tag title shot. They go together as a tag team and they become tag team champions. That will be a moment worth waiting for and worth celebrating once it does happen. I love what they've done with Ethan Carter III. You know, they're developing this character relatively well. I like it. I like it a lot. But I really, really love what they're doing with Rockstar Spud right now. God, he's entertaining as piss, period. Match of the night without question has to be Kurt Angle versus Bobby Roode inside of a steel cage. I could sit there and talk about the fact that I feel like Kurt Angle maybe needs to tone it down a little bit. Maybe Kurt Angle doesn't need to take so many unnecessary risks or what I may deem as unnecessary risks. But I give him credit. Man, he went out there and busted his ass and did everything he could to get this match over. Bobby Roode went out there and did everything he could to get this match over. And these two guys, I've really grown to be a fan of this feud, frankly. I've really grown to be a fan of these two guys having a rivalry. And I was starting to get to the point like, I've seen it before. I don't really need to see it again. But they've done such a good job of making this a personal issue. They've done such a good job of making Bobby Roode not look like a complete chump coward bitch by having him not be afraid, by having him saying, you know what, you want me in a cage? Fuck it, you're on. You know, he hasn't backed down. And they've also had Bobby Roode win a couple of matches against Kurt Angle. By hook or by crook, he still won them. So in the past where maybe I would have been really bothered and upset by the older guy going over the TNA guy, I could live with it a little bit here because the match became so good that it really didn't matter who won or who lost. It really didn't. And the fact that Kurt Angle, in spite of everything, even though he won, he still barely won. And it was clearly established and demonstrated several times that Bobby Roode came this close to winning, and again at the end as well. So that, to me, doesn't really hurt a guy. If anything, that helps elevate a guy because people know Kurt Angle is legit. Now, if people and fans didn't understand that Bobby Roode is legit, they clearly, truly know that he is. Well done to TNA with this entire feud and rivalry and how it was done. Well done to both Kurt Angle and Bobby Roode for how this rivalry and this feud was done. And if this was indeed the blow-off, the one last match between these two, very well done by him again. Really, really well done. A pay-per-view worthy match, no question about it. There are a lot of pay-per-views that if they had this as their main event, people will feel good about the pay-per-view as a whole, period. And that's what you want. If you're going to sit there and tell people that we're giving you pay-per-view quality stuff for free, you better give us pay-per-view quality stuff on their regular cable network. This match here was definitely a clear-cut example of that, period. And then we get to the main event, and I have to say this, is that if you know ahead of time what to expect sometimes, and you understand that it's going to be one big clusterfuck, and it's going to feel like Russo booked it, and Dusty Rhodes booked it, and maybe even James E. Cornette booked it. If you know that type of stuff going in, sometimes it eases your level of frustration, and it makes it a little more palpable to your wrestling taste buds to have to sit back and watch it. Now, I will also say that since I had enjoyed pretty much the rest of the show, even like the shit with the bromance, their promo was so bad that it actually started to entertain me, to the point where I was actually happy to see EY and Abyss, and see Abyss wipe those mother humpers out. Your tag team champs and a future #1 contender for the X Division in DJ Zema Ion. Their promo was so bad that, for me anyways, it crossed over into the entertaining land. I know I'm alone in that probably, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm not. But with all this other stuff that I mentioned, came across really, really well to me with the second part of Genesis this week. When we got to the main event, like I said, I knew what to expect going into it, and I knew, what I was going to get and what I was getting into. And while I don't like the fact that they're basically having Magnus hide behind Dixie Carter, and you having all these different minions doing this stuff to protect Magnus and do the bidding of Dixie Carter to try and get on the good side, at least I could say this is, at this moment, you don't have an overbearing, overdominant heel faction. You don't have an equally large and overdominant, overbearing face faction. And, it's okay every once in a while to implement some elements of Crash TV. At some point in time, I do think they need to let Magnus kind of stand out on his own and establish himself as a real deal, legit champion, and not just kind of that Dixie boy paper champion. I get that's what they're going for right now, but at some point in time, you got to do something a little bit more to add some depth to the Magnus character as your world champion. But you got Magnus versus Sting. If Sting wins, he becomes champion one more time. If he loses, he's gone from TNA. And I'll have to say this. You got what you could expect out of a Sting match at this point. And maybe it's a good thing that you had all these different run-ins and interference. You had Samoa Joe out there. You had Kurt Angle run out there at one point. You had Bad Influence and Robert Roode and all these different people run out there, because it allows you to mask the fact that Sting can't really go at a main event level anymore. So maybe it's not the most negative thing in the world. I mean, like I said, let's face it, Sting's, 54, almost 55 years old, and TNA for years has relied on him too much, put him in too many big spots, too many main event spots. The guy's wrestling with the damn T-shirt. He can't even apply his own submission finisher anymore. It's kind of sad to see, in a way, what Sting's become. Even when you see his bald spot on top of his head, good God, I didn't realize just how big it was getting. Oh, Jesus. So this match is what this match is. And ultimately, it arrived where it needed to. With Magnus winning, Sting losing, and hopefully Sting being gone from TNA once and for all. And maybe we could finally get him to have a run in the WWE. Now, some people will say, well, how hypocritical is that? Sting's a top guy here in TNA and everybody hates it, but if he goes to WWE, it's glorious. Yeah, but Sting had also been with TNA, 8, 9 years? Sting had been pounded down your throat for year after year after year after year as not just a guy, but a top guy, and in a lot of cases, the top guy in TNA. There's a lot more intrigue and possibilities to a Sting going to a WWE, a place that he's never worked before, to face some people he's never faced before, and be featured differently, featured as a guy, but not the guy, a guy that you could pick or choose your spots with. And this could be all a big set of bullshit, and Sting could decide not to do it, not to make the leap again to WWE, but he needs to. I realize a lot of people respect Sting because of the fact he's never worked for Vince McMahon. But to me, he needs to do it, and he needs to go to the WWE. If anything else, to go there for a year and give TNA fans a break from him, and have TNA be able to understand that they don't have to rely so much on a damn Sting, because what is a Sting really doing? The ratings apparently for this show were very good. I think they had over 1.5 million viewers this week. Well, when you give them good matches like Gunner versus James Storm, an X Division title match with Aries and Sabin, You give them an outstanding pay-per-view main event in a lot of cases, worthy match between Kurt Angle and Robert Roode, and matches that actually had story to them as well. They got people emotionally invested. It's not a surprise that more people checked out the product this week. And to see maybe Sting's last match in TNA. But TNA should not be fooled. Sting has been at the top for a long time in their company. And what has that really ultimately done for them? What has that ultimately led to? It is time for TNA to start full force this new direction, to start full force with this youth movement, to transition away from the legends, if you will, the old WCW and ECW and WWE guys. They need to move away from that because those guys have had their time, they've had their place, and that place and time is no longer. It is not today. And maybe that's why people are tuning in a little bit more to TNA, at least they did this week, because they're seeing all these fresh faces. Gunner and James Storm in a great feud. Aries and Sabin in a good feud. You've got Roode and Angle. Yeah, you could say, well, Angle, da-da-da. Okay, but it's one guy as opposed to all types of guys like a Kurt Angle. All these old WWE and ECW and WCW guys. And then Sting. Now you've got Magnus. You've got a young heel champion, and you're getting ready to go on your big UK tour. You know, things look a little bit better for TNA. So as pissed as I was with them last week, and I should have been and still am, for not delivering what they're promised, at least I'll say this, they made up for it some with giving me a really good part 2 of Genesis this week.